my name is Shannon Whitmore. Obviously, you know the end of my vocation story. My husband is Andrew Whitmore. You met him, I think, last week. So we've been married for 6 years now. We have 2 children. John is 5 and Felicity is going to be 3 next week. So some of you will have the pleasure of dealing with them next week. They're very excited to be doing medieval times camp. So that's obviously the end of my story. Goodbye. So I'm going to tell you how I got to this point. It was not a very easy journey. It was very long. There were a lot of mountains and valleys and things that I worked out before I got to this point. So my vocations journey kind of actually began in high school when I started to take my faith a bit more seriously. I come from a Catholic family. We are all Catholic. We're all Italian. So my very Italian grandmother lived across the street from us. I don't know if any of you have ever seen Everybody Loves Raymond, older TV show. But if you know you've got Ray who lives across the street from his parents, and they're constantly there. So that was my grandparents lived across the street. My grandmother, no lie, would sit in the window watching to make sure that we would get into the car and drive to church on Sundays. And if we didn't show up, she would be on the phone almost immediately afterwards, trying to figure out where we were, who was sick, because if somebody was not sick, it was going to be hell pay. So it was very interesting. But I went to Catholic school my entire life, except for pre-K when I did Jewish pre-K, which I learned how to read, so cool. But after that, I did Catholic school all my entire life. We looked very, very Catholic. I was an altar server. We were all pushed to be altar servers. I'm from New Jersey. I don't know if you can tell from the accent. In our diocese, which I was very surprised when I came down here, and this wasn't the case anymore, girls and boys are altar servers. So that was something that I did as a child. I did everything that I was supposed to. I received all my sacraments. But my faith was very, very external. To the point where, if you walked into my house, there was nothing that told you that I was Catholic. There was not a single crucifix. There were no statues. We did not say grace unless it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. There was literally nothing that told you that we were Catholic, unless it was given to us by my grandmother. So everything was very, very external until I got to high school. I went to a Salesian high school, so I know one of the parishes down the road a little bit is St. John Bosco. So I went to a school run by the Salesians of St. John Bosco. Their passion is youth, young people, and their nuns are the coolest nuns I have ever met. So we had on our school campus the retired nuns home. So there were nuns everywhere, sisters. There were sisters everywhere. They taught our school. One of them was our principal. One of them was a librarian. One of them coached volleyball. They were just all over. They were in your life. And when I was a junior, 2 of my best friends just happened to be Catholic and practicing and very, very serious about their faith. And they invited me to go to a student-go conference. So if anybody knows about them, it's a pretty intense retreat conference experience in Steubenville, Ohio. So I went to that, and by the time I came home, I was 100% changed. I was a totally different kid on the inside. I kind of looked the same on the outside because I had been doing all of it all along anyway. But I really started to take my faith seriously. So I started getting more involved in campus ministry. I started leading retreats. I was on the ministry team. I tried anything that was there. I did it. I got really, really excited. The one thing I did not anticipate was as soon as I started taking my faith more seriously, I became the nuns' radar turned on, and they're all here's a vocation, you need to get on her now. So there was I took the bus to school, and there was a nun who would wait right as he came off the bus, and every morning she would greet me, and she would, hello Shannon, have you thought about your vocation yet? When are you joining us? Every single day she had another question for me, and she was there every single day. So it got so bad that for a while, the way it worked was our bus would let us off by the locker room, but if you went up the steps to the side, you can go straight to the gym, avoiding the nun. So I avoided the nun every day for my senior year, because I was like, I can't. I don't want to do this. I don't want to talk to her. I'm going to avoid her. I'm going to hide from her, whatever I have to do. So every so often, I'd be walking, she'd just pop up. And she'd be like, hi Shannon, have you thought about it yet? And it was a little terrifying. Because when I was in high school, I did not want to be a nun. Anytime that they brought it up, I was just like, I can't. I don't about my wedding day. I was a little girl as a child who I would think about what my wedding dress was going to look like. I would think about what Disney prince I was going to marry one day. I had everything planned. I knew who was going to be in my bridal party, even though we stopped seeing each other after I graduated 8th grade. But I did all the planning. So I was like, no, I'm going to get married. I want to get married. I want my wedding day. So of course I don't want to be a nun. And I just didn't feel called. And they always talk about how you feel called to your vocation. And I'm like, I don't feel called to be a religious. I don't know what that means. There have been no outward signs besides little sister Catherine, who is always there, and I just disregarded her because it's kind of like their job. I figured, once you're in it, that's kind of like your job to get more people into it. So I was like, I'm just going to disregard her. But there were no other signs. There was nothing else that suggested Shannon, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And to be honest, I didn't feel called to anything. I wanted my wedding day, but anytime I thought about getting married, it was just about my wedding day. It was never about what came after. I couldn't see myself with kids. I did not change a single diaper until my son was born. We did not have little kids in my family. I did not have little kids. I did not interact with them. I knew nothing about them. So I was like, it seems nice, but anytime I pictured marriage, it was kind of like a nice painting, and it was still, and there was not it was not life. There was no life there. But anytime I imagined me being a nun, I like praying, but and I just can't picture that. So I didn't feel called to anything. I didn't know what that meant. So I was like, I'm still young. I've got plenty of time. So I decided to do the one thing that I was sure about. I knew I liked school, so I went to DeSales University. I majored in theology and psychology. My vision was to actually become I figured if I was never going to get married, because I really wasn't sure, my dream kind of was to foster teenage girls who no longer have families. And that I would just have a home, and I would have these girls that I would live with, and I would kind of be like this pseudo-mother to them. And that was kind of what I envisioned, because I was like, there's no guy here. I'm going to try to envision a life without him until something else comes along. And so I went to DeSales, majoring in theology and psychology. I did that. By the time I graduated, I still wasn't sure. So I went to the John Paul II Institute for Marriage and Family Studies. My concentration was in marriage and family studies. Again, I still had that focus. But my second semester there, I took a class in the states of life. So there are 2 states of life. That would be 2 things that you can take you take vows for. So when you're married, obviously you take vows, and when you become a consecrated religious, you take vows. Priesthood kind of throw it into that, but there are no actual vows that a priest makes when he becomes a priest. And then single, because it is kind of flexible and it could potentially have an end point, we wouldn't call that necessarily a state of life. So we were looking primarily at marriage and consecrated religious life. But we started the class by talking about how the fundamental way of approaching discernment in your vocation is to be open to God. And you talk about how Jesus Christ he's the perfect, he was a single man who gave his entire life to God, obviously. But he also is married to the church. So he embodies, and Mary also, you can see the same kind of idea. They both embody both states of life in their very being. And that is because they are open to God. And as I'm sitting there and the guy's talking, I'm like, shoot, I've never been open to the religious life. I've always shot it down, almost super against it. How can I say that I'm a good Catholic and just be so against the religious life? And I kept thinking about it and contemplating it, and by the end of that semester, if you guys don't know me personally, but once you get to know me, you realize once I have an idea in my head, it's really hard for me to let go of it. So everything else stops, the world stops, and I go. So I dropped out. I sold all my stuff, and I joined the Salesians of St. John Bosco, the order that ran my high school, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a handful of books. So I joined that summer, and I spent 8 months with them. And over those 8 months, it was a life-changing experience. Obviously not in the way that you would have thought, because we know how it turned out. But it really was a life-changing experience for me. So I spent 8 months as what's called an aspirant. So the Salesians, typically you have postulants who are that's your first tier. Then you become novices, where there are preliminary vows. Sometimes they're habited, sometimes they're not. And then you you start taking your temporary vows and your permanent vows. But the Salesians, because they tended to have very young vocations when they started, they actually had an additional earlier stage called the aspirants. So I started as an aspirant. We lived at Mary Help in their convent, and so my life for the next 8 months kind of looked like this. During the week, we would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and that was one of the things that I really thought I wasn't going to be able to do. And I learned once you kind of get into the habit of it, it becomes so much easier. So much to the point that on Saturdays we were allowed to sleep in until 7, and like that felt so late to me because I was so used to waking up at 5. So it completely like changes the way that you look at like even time, because like waking up at 5 every morning, 7 seems like like that's amazing. So I'd wake up at 5 every morning. 5:40 we would be in the convent. We would pray together as a community. There were I entered with 5 other girls. And we would join with the rest of the sisters, and we would pray. We would have mass together. We would have morning prayer, and we would have meditation. Meditation was the hardest part of my day because most of it was about me trying to stay awake, which is really, really hard at 5:40 in the morning. But 50% of the time was probably successful. I really latched onto that St. Therese quote where she's talking about how she's like the puppy dog falling asleep at the feet of Jesus. That was me pretty much every morning falling asleep at the feet of Jesus. But so we would have that together in the morning, and then we would go down to the school. We would have breakfast. We'd welcome the girls. Then we would go have breakfast ourselves. We would have classes that we went to every day. I coached softball. I played softball in high school and in college, so that was actually something that I was able to do while I was an aspirant. Every afternoon, I'd get to go take the girls down to the softball field, and we practice, and we were allowed to go to all the games and stuff. And that was really, really enjoyable. Then I would come back, we would have evening prayer together in the chapel, we would pray a rosary together, we would do spiritual reading, and then we would all come together for dinner and recreation. And recreation was like the most ridiculous thing ever. Some days it was like very low key, we'd watch a movie, or we would play games or something. But I don't know if you guys have ever played spoons, but playing with nuns is really, really scary because there was one nun who she would scoop up the entire thing and she would toss it around the room, so that all the spoons were scattered throughout the room, and she would keep the one for herself. So that everybody else was trying to get the rest of the spoons, but she always had it. She would always do it. And they were very competitive. Some of them were very competitive. And then other days we'd actually go and play sports. So I'd play basketball with them, we'd play volleyball, we'd play softball, whatever we wanted to play. We spent about an hour and a half together every day, just doing something as a community to bond as a community. Then during the week, on the weekends, we had a bit more freedom. We were able to sleep until 7. We had some free time to walk around, to pray. Sometimes we went to like different events. Things that you don't think that you'd be able to do as a religious. I went to Disney World for the very first time as a religious because they were having a Vocations conference in Orlando. So we went to represent the Salesians, and we're all sitting there looking nice and cute in our little jumpers that we had to wear. And somebody came over and she's like, "Oh, you guys are so cute. Have you ever been to Disney before?" And I'm like, "No, actually I haven't been." And she's like, "Well, if that's the case, here are tickets. Go have a fun day at Disney." So we got to spend the entire day at Disney World, which was pretty awesome. I went on a yacht for the first time ever because one of our people who gave a lot of money to the school had a yacht. And so he would invite the sisters once a year to have dinner on his yacht, and so I got to do that. So stuff that I got to go to a Yankees game, Yankees, which was pretty cool. Remember how many World Series we won. So I got to do a lot of stuff as an aspirant, things that generally don't think nuns get to do. But I get what I realized over the first 8 months is that. So I realized a lot of things. Number one, they are so happy. Like I had in my mind that that you have to be hiding, you got to be pretending, because there's no way that you can be happy not being married and having kids. Like the idea that could be possible, it just didn't make sense to me. But I've met women who were so happy doing what they were doing, and I am still in contact with a lot of them. And they pray for us, and they talk to us, and we go up when we visit family in New Jersey, and we always go to visit them because they're kind of like family too. They love their lives, and it was so beautiful to see. And I also thought, in my mind, to become a nun or a priest, or it means losing your personality, losing who you are. like the things that really make you you. I thought because you have to put on the habit, because you've got the priest garb, that everybody's pretty much the same, and they're kind of just squashing the things that make us unique. And I realized that that's so not true. Like I said, I got to play softball, which is something that I was really passionate about, that I've always enjoyed, even as a nun. And like that is not something, like you become more of who you are if that is your vocation. If your vocation is to religious life, you will become more who you are pursuing that. And I realized that like it is really a beautiful vocation. And I think part of the reason why I had to go through the 8 months is now, like, if my son or my daughter come up to me in 10 years or whatever, 15 years, and they say, Mom, I want to become a nun, or Mom, I want to become a priest, I will be able to say with like my whole heart that I am so happy for you. I God, take them. Like, this is definitely the most beautiful thing for them to be pursuing. And I don't think I would have been able to do that otherwise. So what happened? Obviously, I left after 8 months. It all started, so my best friend from the sales and then again at the Institute was getting married, and she wanted me to be in her wedding. And so I got permission from our head mistress to be in the wedding, to even wear, because I was only an aspirant at the time, so I was allowed to, I would have gotten a bridesmaid dress and everything. So I got permission, and over Christmas break, I went to go visit my family for a week, like all of us did, and I went to help her try on dresses. And as I'm sitting there, her extremely atheist sister is sitting next to me, and I'm like, oh, this is like, just, oh God, this, like, there can't be anything good coming out of this, because anytime that, like, she comes, like, anytime she talked to us, it was like, why do you believe this? Why do you believe this? Like, don't you hate, like, you hate gays, you hate these people, you hate these people. So I'm like, oh God, and now it's just like, it's screaming, because, like, I'm wearing the habit. So, she sits down and she's like, I just have a question for you. She's like, when you were in college, anytime you talked about getting married and having kids, your face would light up. Like, what happened? And, I looked at her and I was like, marriage and family life is beautiful. It's beautiful for those who are called to it, but I just don't feel called to it. And it was an answer I'd given over and over and over again. Like, it was a question that I got pretty often. And for that time I answered her sister, for the first time I felt like I was lying. And I went home and I spent the next couple of months actually just thinking about this, and how, like, as time went on, I just felt more and more sure that this calling that I felt to join the religious life was actually something temporary. It had a purpose, but that purpose had been achieved, and so it was time for me to kind of move on. And so that May, I decided to leave with the blessing of my superior. I left. I came home to, like, nothing. Thankfully, I have really, really nice parents who my mom took me out. I really, really appreciated it, but I know that she was very, very happy to be able, she loved shopping. She always said, she was a stay-at-home mom, she's like, your dad makes the money so that I can spend it. And so, very happy to take my dad's money and spend it on a whole new wardrobe, because, all of a sudden I was home, I had no clothes, I had nothing. So luckily my parents were able, like, my room was still there, I was able to go back to live with my parents. They were willing to buy me a new wardrobe. I got a job, and I knew at that point that I was called to marriage. I just wasn't sure, when or how that would happen. So I started to kind of make plans for myself and try to just focus on getting my life back together. It's funny how God always works in His timing, and I made a vow not to date anybody for a solid, so I left in May. I said until September I was not going to date anybody. And I thought that was a pretty good idea at the time. So the person whose wedding I was in, we have like a bride, it was like a joint bachelor party. We went down to the Nationals to see a game. And Andrew is one of the groomsmen in the guy's party. And so I had known him prior, I had known him before we were, before we dated. He was actually dating one of my friends, and then they broke up while I was in the convent. We worked together, and so he sees me, he's like, wait, so he's like, are you on break? And I'm like, yeah, permanently, I'm back. I don't know what I'm doing with my life, but I'm back. And so by the end of that day, we were like flirting, and what am I going to do now? And so I was like, all right, I'm going to be very upfront with you. talk. We were not going to communicate. We were not going to see each other, which was easy because I was in Jersey, he was in DC. The only exception was we did come together for the wedding, which was that summer. And so our friends, they had 9 people on either side, so 18 people total in their party. Guess how many of them were single? 2. Me and oh my God, what? So we spent the whole evening together because we were the only singles in the bridal party. So of course we were seated next to each other. That might have also been my friend orchestrating. She was definitely already planning. So we spent that evening together, but then I went back to Jersey and I did the rest of my sentence. And and then Labor Day weekend, I went to go stay with my friends. They were living in DC, where Andrew was also living, and he planned the most epic 3-day first date ever. So for all of you who have him as a professor, you're going to learn all about him right now, and just don't fall. He's obviously going to know where you found out, so I'm sorry. Sorry, not sorry. So he planned this whole weekend. It was amazing. But the highlight was, so he asked my friend Margaret, she's my best friend, the girl who got married, what kind of food does she like? And she's like, Shannon really likes Mexican. She likes spice. So he's like, okay. So he takes me to this little tapas place, and we're eating, we're talking. I think it's like, this is our second day together. I think it's going well. We're eating, and all of a sudden he starts sweating. It stops making sense. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's either gonna puke or I don't know what I've said, but clearly there's something wrong here. And then I finally was like, are you okay? And he's like, I can't do spice. I barely tolerate pepper. And this is the hottest thing I've ever eaten in my life. And he's eating it, and he ate it for me because even then he loved me. So we had our epic first date weekend, and we actually did that. So we had a long distance relationship for the entirety of our dating. I spent the year in New Jersey making money to actually move back to DC to finish my degree, because now that I kind of figured out the whole religious life thing, I was ready to go back. So we did the whole long distance dating thing. I moved down to DC a year later to pursue my master's, and the first week I'm down there. So I knew he was waiting to ask me to be his wife until I moved down there. That was something that we had already established. We'd already talked about it. And so one of the nights were just there were a couple down evenings, and I was at his place, we were doing something, and he gets a text message from his sister, and all it says is GLTN. And he's like, what does this mean? Good luck tomorrow. And then I'm like, and then he realized it, and he's like, oh, I know what she's talking about. And I'm like, she's going to propose tomorrow. And so I had to spend the entire next day pretending like I didn't know, even though he knew that I knew, because I'm not an idiot, and I knew what And so I know that it's coming. And then, we do some stuff in DC. I kind of knew where he was going to propose, because he asked me to be his girlfriend by one of my favorite monuments, the World War II monument. The one with all the pretty one with all the water and the fountains and all that kind of stuff. Behind there's just this very enclosed, it's just trees and then benches in a circle. It's always empty, always empty. We had been there multiple times. That was where we went, just to hang out. That's where he asked me to be his girlfriend. So we go there. For the first and only time ever, there are these 2 girls sitting there. So he's like, I guess I'm gonna have to wait. And so we spent some time talking, and then he's like, let's do the museum now. So we go to the museum, we come back. Now, they're not reading anymore, they've unpacked their dinner. So he's like, all right, let's go have dinner. So we go and have dinner, and he comes back. And at this point, I'm starting to panic, because I was like, I had a curfew, I was staying with this family that was a little crazy, and they had a curfew for me at 10 p.m. I'm 24 at this time. I didn't think I needed a curfew, but they felt like I did. So I have to be back by 10 p.m. We took the metro in, so that's you have to start planning. And I'm like, he's running out of time. And so, either this is not going to happen, or he's going to have to do it in front of these 2 people. He chose to do it in front of the 2 people. So he proposes, he gets down on his knee. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And all we hear behind us is this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You just witnessed a proposal. you're supposed to be like, congratulations, that's so cute. And all they're doing is like, clouds, like, you ruined our day. We were trying to be here, had a quiet reading day, and you keep coming back. Just leave. You did it. You did what you came here to do. Just go. And so we got up, we left because we had done what we came to do, and it was 9:15, and I needed to get home. So he proposed. We got married 10 months later in my home parish on my parents' anniversary. So we got married in the church that my parents got married in on the day that they got married. It was really, really special. It also happened to be Memorial Day weekend, which is why we chose the date, so it was kind of a coincidence. But don't tell my mom that. So we got married, and 9.5 months later, John was born. And 2.5 years after that, my daughter Felicity was born. And so obviously it was kind of like a train wreck getting to the point where we got married, like the whole thing. But I needed it. There were a lot of things that I needed. Like I needed to know that the religious life was something beautiful. But the biggest thing that I needed to learn personally, so the reason why I thought that I should pursue the religious life was because I thought that was the best way to become holy. And the one thing after I converted that I felt very strongly about was that I wanted to be as holy as I could be. And in my mind, that meant the religious life. And so I decided that I needed to join the religious life because if I was going to be the holiest that I could be, it was going to be, pursuing the religious life. Eventually what I realized was if you're called to the religious life, that is true. But if you were called to marriage, the best place for you to become holy is in marriage. So, obviously, if we're going to talk theologically, religious life is superior to the married life. It is, we are a sign, they have the reality. They are already experiencing some way the reality of being united to God. We are a sign of that union. But if you are called to marriage and you know that, if you feel that, but then you decide to go join the religious life because you think that it's, because you need to go to the higher one, you have chosen what was subjectively your higher vocation to pursue what was subjectively your lower vocation, even if it is objectively higher. Because God has called you to be married. If God has called you to be married, you know that in marriage and family life, that is how you will become a saint. That is how He has envisioned sainthood for you. But it took me a very long time to realize that. I also had, one of the things that just kept coming up through my vocational journey was the nuns kept telling me that the things that made me unique, some of like my personality traits, were perfect for the religious life. That was what they were saying. You're patient, you like to pray. You enjoy quiet and solitude. Like these are all things that would make a good religion, which is true. Like, if you have those, if you are an extreme extrovert, need to talk to people, bubbling all over the place, you might struggle in the religious life. I'm not gonna lie. That if you're called to it, God will give you the grace to handle it. But just generally speaking, to have that personality, it's going to be harder. You will have to overcome more in order to really settle in that life. But the nuns were all telling me that I was the perfect candidate. What I eventually realized was, a lot of the things that they said would make me a good nun actually made me a good mother and wife as well. Because patience, definitely need that when dealing with toddlers. And then the biggest thing that I learned is just because you're good at praying does not mean you're called to the religious life. And it took me a really long time to realize that, and I think it was hard because the nuns were constantly telling me otherwise. But I think during my time there, the more I prayed about it, the more I realized that, we are all called to be holy. We are all called to be saints. And obviously, part of the way to doing that is praying. So we are all called to be good at prayer. Our prayer life is going to look different depending on what our vocation is. I do not pray the way that I did as a nun, as an aspirant, as I do now. But I will say that, with the exception of the newborn months, which are extremely hard, most of the things that I did as a religious, I actually continue to do now. The things that really mean a lot to me, I continue to do. I really like to read, so spiritual reading, I still do that. I really like going to Mass, so I find my way to go to daily Mass as often as I can. I love adoration. I try to find as many opportunities to go to adoration as possible. Rosary was a bit of a struggle for me. We pray a decade together as a family. But a lot of the things, it's just instead of spending an hour in the chapel, which you could do when you're a nun, it's 10 minutes here, it's 5 minutes there, it's 15 minutes there. You find your time, and the longer you are in your vocation, the easier it becomes as you continue to practice. what married life is all about. So like that was my journey to becoming to getting to being married, and that's kind of like what I've learned. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, I would be happy to answer any questions about marriage, religious life, parenthood, whatever you have now.
Okay, this probably sounds like a random question, but how does one talk about getting engaged? Or get engaged? You're like, oh yes, we decided someday we're getting married, and now we're going to say when. And how does that help?
That's actually kind of what it is. So I actually felt the opposite. So like there was one time. So I was a figure skater as a child. I competed, and there was this. I always wanted to skate at Rockefeller Center, and the one time I went to Rockefeller Center, somebody got proposed to, and the girl said no. And I'm like, how did you get to this point in your relationship where you have been dating together and been together and you don't know that she's going to say yes? Like obviously something like a conversation needed to happen that did not happen. In my mind, like that should not be, your engagement should not be the first time you're talking about marriage. Andrew and I actually started talking about marriage on our third day together. Not like, like hypothetically, like, if we were to get married, like, what would you, how many kids do you think would be your ideal? Or like, right now, at that time I was a DRE, so he's like, did you want to pursue, continue as a DRE, or would you rather stay at home? Or, like we were talking about like, like what's your opinion on education? And so we talked about those different things, pretty early on, but, yeah, I would say by the end of the third day, I think we both kind of felt like that was the direction. I only ever dated with the intention of getting married. So if I dated a guy and he ended up being a tool, I dropped him. Like there was no reason for me to date him because it was only going to end up one way. And why put all the time and effort into a relationship that I know how it's going to end. So I only ever dated kind of with the expectation that like if it worked out, we were going to get married. So we did talk about it. It was something that we did talk about pretty often because you're dreaming. Like we were young and in love, and so we talked about our wedding day and where we were on our honeymoon and what our life would be like after we got married. But like, well, if it hadn't been for a sister, I wouldn't have known exactly when we were going to get engaged. There was a bit of surprise to that, and like he was able to woo me in that aspect. But like if you were dating with the intention of getting married, like those are topics that come up. That way, you don't end up being the guy who gets turned down on the ass in front of thousands of people.
So like, there's like when you've been dating for a while, is there like an area in your relationship where it's like, dating for a while seems to be working, but we're not engaged yet. Now we need to talk about things. Is that like a thing that happens?
I think it happens for some people. I mean, for us, we started talking about, I was a bit older when we started dating. I was 24, so he was 25. So it was, once we decided that, like, this was something that we thought was going to work, we were already kind of making the plans to make it happen. So, like, I started making the plans to move down to DC. We started to become much more practical about, like, the different things that would need to fall into place in order to have us get married. Because there were obviously certain things that needed to happen before, we actually got married. So we made as those things happened, once all those things fell into place, at that point we're like, all right, let's get engaged, and as quickly as we can, let's get married. So 6 months is the minimum. We had to wait a little bit longer. I would have been very happy with a 6-month engagement. My mom probably wouldn't have been. I had the issue. I was a DRE, so I had a very strict work schedule. I was by myself, so I couldn't really take time off. So we knew that we needed to wait for a holiday weekend. So that's why it ended up being Memorial Day, because that was the next holiday. But yeah, once we were sure and we felt like we were in a position to start making those decisions in that direction, why postpone, was kind of our mentality. Yeah. All right,
Marriage more spontaneous and more planned, organized, things fall into place.
In what?
Like throughout your relationship, would you say things like happen more naturally, or are you like?
So it did come very, all right, I'm gonna answer what I think you're asking, and if I don't answer it, then ask me again in a different use of different. All right, so one of the things that they taught us when we were in the convent was to always live with open palms. Because the idea was, when you wake up in the morning, you have no idea what's gonna happen. Like, we had our routine, it was very structured, it was very top down, so like we had a superior telling us everything that we needed to do, but like if something happened, it got changed. Like, we lived next to the elderly nuns home, so obviously someone died. So like, we might have our classes for that day, and then superior would come in, classes are canceled, you're singing at the funeral. And so like, it was all like, you had to live with your hands open, because you never knew what you were gonna get, you never knew what was gonna get taken away. And so that was, because everything was kind of given to us, because we didn't take the vows of obedience, but like, we were practicing the vows of obedience. It was very much like, there was a structure, but within that structure, we really needed to live with our hands open. What I realized about marriage, though, is it's very, very similar. Because like, I am a huge fan of schedules, and I schedule everything to like, it's a little embarrassing. But like, I love routine, I love schedule, and I think for the most part, when you're dealing with little kids, that's actually very helpful, because they know what to expect, and if they know what to expect, then they tend to be happier about it. But in the same way that you need to live with your hands, like, all right, guys, we need to be out the door, we have somewhere to be at 11, and then Felicity decides to poop in her diaper. All of a sudden, it's like, all right, I gotta go take care of what just happened, and then, we were gonna be 10 minutes early, now we're gonna be 5 minutes late, but, you just have to do what you have to do. Or like, you're planning to go, like tomorrow we're going to the Cove. We have these plans, I'm planning and thinking about what we need to do in order to have that happen. Tomorrow morning, when the kids wakes up sick, well, there go all my plans out the door, and I have to live with my hands open. So does that kind of answer your question? Yes.
There's been a time where like you decided to like leave the religious order, and then like you met after there's more like in between that time, besides like praying and like working out and like, you as a person, was there anything else that you did that like really encouraged you to like kind of like wait on the Lord?
It's hard to say, because that time frame that you're talking about was 3 weeks. So in those 3 weeks, those were pretty crazy weeks, because that was a lot of shopping, a lot of job hunting, I needed to find a job, a lot of prayer. I will say that after I left, because I kind of knew where God was leading me, and because in a sense, I'd already discerned my vocation, I was now just waiting for God's time to come about. I kind of just focused on actually keeping the same prayer routine, prayer life that I had prior to leaving, because I had a free time. I also will say, like at the Institute, most of the students kept a very similar prayer routine. So like we would go to classes in the morning together. It's at the Basilica of the National Shrine, like that property, Catholic University. So we would all go to mass together at the Basilica, and then we would all do a prayer hour together. Like, so it was all of us together. So it was kind of like just part of our regular life, and so that was just something I continued doing and praying. And I will say, from the time I was in high school, so I was in a True Love Weights Club, because that's what Catholic girls do in Catholic school. And I had a ring that I wore literally from the day that I got it as a sophomore in high school to the day that Andrew proposed. And he put a ring on my finger. And I wore that ring, and every time I would come into or leave a church after blessing myself, I would always pray for my future spouse, and I would wipe the holy water on the ring as just a reminder, because it was kind of already there. And so it was something that that was something that I actually kept up. I prayed for my vocation when I was in the religious life, but I still actually had the True Love Weights ring. I never took it off. And my plan was, because we would have gotten bans if I had continued, so I was just going to change it then. But yeah, there wasn't really that much time. But I just focused on strengthening my relationship with God. And then, because I knew at that, it was really just like trusting that God would have things happen in His time as they were meant to be. And so that's kind of what it was for all those 3 weeks. Yeah.
When you guys met at you said it was like the bachelor party, like
Yeah.
foundation? When you guys met, like, you said you were kind of like flirting with each other by the end of the night, like, how did that conversation come up to where you were like, hey, by the way, I'm not dating right now? Like, was that, did that just like randomly come up, or was it?
No, at some point, I think he was like, I think he actually just asked me straight up, like, what were my plans now that I left the convent.
Oh.
And so it kind of just, I told him, I was like, I have, especially because at that point, we kind of already knew we were flirting and, he was testing the waters and I was testing the waters. So I was like, I'm just going to cut to the chase and telling you, I was not planning on dating until September. And the one thing that I will say, before I even said that I was going to follow that, he said that I had to follow that. And that was a big thing for me because he felt that my relationship with God and the promise that I had made was important enough to keep. And that if he was calling us to get married, then that was part of our dream. And I think I needed that time too, because I was working through a lot, and I had literally just left the convent, and so I needed a couple of months to kind of get my life together. Any other questions?
What would you say about discerning vocation to call for both?
So, all right, this actually goes either way. So if you feel called to both or you feel called to neither, somebody told me this. I don't remember where, but it's something that has really resonated with me, and I do think that in a lot of cases it can be true. Join the convent. Because there will never be a better place to discern your vocation than the quiet and peace. If you think you might be called to a vocation. Obviously, if you feel very strongly toward marriage, then that generally speaking shouldn't be something you need to do. But if you are unsure, or if you feel like you might be called to, you don't know which way, and if there's nothing, for me, that was kind of the way that I looked at it. I was like, I'm just getting my degree. I don't need this degree, I'm just doing it because I've got time on my hands, and I don't really want to work yet. And so it kind of worked that, if I'm going to be doing all this, I might as well do it in, the best case scenario. And, having, because literally, we had 45 minutes in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. We had half-day retreats that we would do silently, just pray. Having that ability, having it structured in your life, that was so important. And if that's not something you can do, I would say that as a mini version, there are religious orders that you feel particularly called to or you really like, you're interested in. A lot of them will do come and see weekends, which will last an entire weekend, and even that sometimes is enough to really because you need that prayer time. And so for me, it ended up being 8 months of prayer time, which I'm a slow learner, so maybe God felt like I needed all 8 of those 8 months to learn what I needed to learn. But for some people, it's really just do the come and see. There are no promises made. You show up, you do your thing, you can do as many as you want. In the 3 months that I was there, this one girl showed up pretty much every single time. They did it once a month, and she was there every month. And she would come, and it was kind of like her retreat. And I actually don't know what happened to her, but for the 8 months that I was there, that was something that because she was very seriously discerning the religious life, and so she figured, this is the best place to do it because nowhere else are you going to get the peace and the quiet, just in your day, just given to you. You don't have to make room for it. It's literally just given to you. So it doesn't work for everybody, but it works. Any other questions?
What would you say, that was a good question. Then, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this because you're a woman, but what would you say to guys in that same way? How do you feel comfortable with either way?
Kind of the same. I mean, I know the religious order that I was part of had boys and girls, so the guys would come and see weekends too, so that was definitely structured. I mean, obviously, if you're making major steps, that you have to feel like this really might be your vocation. Obviously, I wouldn't suggest if you're maybe thinking about it, that you sell everything that you have and go to the convent. It ended up working for me, but but a lot of times they do set up these weekends, and I know the diocese, they have weekends and retreats and all sorts of things that allow you to kind of just